with one another. I grew up as a Pakistani in the West, and my parents were immigrants, and they did their best to raise us with the values that they had grown up with. And that meant that there was a very strong emphasis of school put into our home, specifically STEM-based subjects. Now, I loved math and science, but what I didn't understand was why I had to hide that part of myself in front of my peers. I would go to school and I would be inundated with fashion and music and makeup, and I loved every part of that, but I couldn't understand why I was constantly having to show half of who I was. So fast forward about a decade, and I got a degree in computer science, and I moved to the Bay Area about 3 years ago, where I came across this documentary, Debugging the Gender Gap. And there's this one scene where these young girls are talking about how they don't want to go into STEM because those women are nerdy and antisocial and unfriendly. And I remember watching this, thinking to myself that I know about these stereotypes, but I didn't realize that they were preventing young girls from pursuing really fulfilling careers down the line. And then I started thinking about it. I thought about the role models that we're taught about as kids. We learn about men like Benjamin Franklin, who was an inventor and a founding father and a scientist and a politician. We celebrate the fact that he was multi-dimensional. We don't do that with women, though. We have very clear narratives we create for women, and we try to box them into those narratives. But can you imagine a world where those narratives didn't exist? Can you imagine a world where a young girl felt like she could program a video game and then walk into a Sephora and get her makeup done while her code is compiling? Or, a world where a young girl felt like she could walk into basketball practice and talk about the frog she dissected the day before. I wanted to create that world, so I started Unboxd, a company that's changing the narrative for women in the media. Stereotypes like dumb blonde, ugly nerd, smart Asian are not only archaic, but they are detrimental to a young girl's confidence as she's growing up. I am going to create a world where every single girl feels comfortable embracing every beautiful part of who she is. I am going to create a world where no 15-year-old girl has to wake up and think about which part of herself she needs to hide that day so society can accept her. I am going to create a world where our mainstream role models are celebrated for their intellect, along with every other facet of their being. I am going to create a world where we finally stop boxing women into stereotypes. Thank you.